Hi there everyone, it's great to see you. I hope I find you well. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcoming you back up here to the loft on Weir Yard. Now today we're going to be taking a look at some items from an all-new startup company called TimbScale, and these are 3D printed. Now we have reviewed some 3D printed items on the channel before, and I've always said that this is a really exciting area in the hobby because it allows for making bespoke items or things that really wouldn't be practical either financially or physically to make by any other method. Now, the techniques for making these models is improving so fast. It really is amazing how far we've come in a short space of time. Now, at the time that this video goes out, TimbScale will have been only a few days launched, but the range really is truly impressive. And I'm really grateful to longtime Monday Clubber TimberSurf, who's behind TimbScale, for sending these items over for review. So come with me and let's take a look in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts, and also Billy's Replacement Speakers, who are purveyors of all of our merch, from Billy's Replacement Speakers branded hoodies, t-shirts, and there is plenty of merch for you to browse through and treat yourself. So come with me, let's take a look at this new exciting range from TimbScale. 3D printing is very much the new frontier for our hobby, and I'm really grateful to TimbScale for sending over an assortment of some of their new products, which really does take advantage of this new and developing technology. It's really coming on in leaps and bounds, and what I've seen is, even in a very short space of time, the fidelity of the models that can be produced in this way is rapidly getting better and better, and this really does allow very short production runs of items, even one-offs, and it means that you can have all manner of detailing parts and even full buildings for your layout that would have really been very difficult, if not impossible, to justify in a ready-to-run, mass-produced kind of way. Now, TimbScale is a new player to this market, and those of you who watch the Monday Club will be quite familiar with TimberSurf, who is behind the TimbScale range, and he very kindly offered to send over a number of the new items. So I've got them spread out here, and we're going to just have a quick look through, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see just how well these paint up and become a finished item that I can then add as part of a project to Weir Yard. The first item is this Cambridge roller. Now, it's something that you do see even now, a lot of these around. You could imagine these being used on, for example, even a cricket or a sports pitch. Certainly a farmer would be using these, but you could also have these as a rusty artifact in the bushes. And for me, I think that that's going to be probably the area that I'm going to go down with this, is to paint it all up and then weather it down, and then try and model it with kind of long grass around it, so it looks like something that a farmer has abandoned and just left it to go to seed in a field. And I think that this will be a very interesting little bit of a feature that I can add to a part of Weir Yard. So I'm actually really looking forward to painting this up. I'm going to steer away from the really garish sort of oranges and blues that I've seen models of these released in when they're kind of new and all shiny, and instead I'm going to probably try and paint it more so it looks really well rusted. Now, another advantage of this 3D printing, I suspect, is that you can heat up parts of it and actually bend them, and then when it cools they'll set in a kind of distorted shape, so you could even model these things having been bashed around quite a bit. This has been heavily weathered with weathering powders, and you can see some heavy weathering has really brought out the detail on the roller itself. That is really nice. Still a bit of a shine on the rest of it. That's really more a case of the disappointment of this particular tinlet of Humbrol enamel. This is actually a matte colour. Says matte on the tin, but quite clearly it's dried as gloss, which is a little bit disappointing, although it is slightly more glossy on the camera than it is to the naked eye, but I will try and tone that down once it is glued in situ. This is where I'm planning on putting the Cambridge roller. I just place it in here. This has already got some quite thick static grass, so what I will be doing is I've got to kind of squash this in and just put some little tufts of static grass around it. First of all, I think it's a case of making sure that it's got somewhere that it'll kind of just fit into. So I'm just going to squash that down so it gets kind of like a little bit of a furrow here. And I'm going to just put a little bit of the speed bond, and just to make sure that I get the roller properly glued, just put a little bit on there, and that's going to just go down into this area and just push it right in. Really just give it a wiggle, get it to sit right down into that static grass. And then I've got an assortment of static grass, and it's just simply a case of I'm going to put a little bit of the glue just around the front here and a little bit down the back, and maybe some just at this side. And you kind of with the really long, this is the 12mm static grass, I'm just going to put some of this in and try some different colours. Actually, I think that's possibly just a little bit on the straw coloured side for what I really want. So I'm going to switch up the colours, and let's just see about making sure that we don't want it too big a clumps. I'm just going to rest this along the back, rest this along the sides, and then I've got a little jeweler's screwdriver and just work this, work it down into the glue so it actually looks like it's growing up through rather than sat on. And there's enough space here. We can have a little bit more. I'm going to go for it again, another different colour there, a little bit back here, and I'm going to just force all this down and in. Static grass layering spray. That will also help to just fix in any of the weathering powders that's just a little bit dusty still on top. I'm going to have just a little bit of other material, some of that onto the roller, quite a bit in there, and I'm happy with that. This particular item really does show through the static grass so well, and I do like the end effect of that static grass from the Warworld Scenics range. Along with the TK Bedford that's buried in the grass behind it, this really does look like a dumping ground for old equipment, and the Cambridge roller does really blend in nicely, really setting the scene for these kind of industrial junk cameos. The next item that's really caught my eye is this kind of Celtic Cross, and these are the sort of thing that you could imagine this in a village square, and that would be something that would be kind of a focal point in the centre of a village. But I've also seen such things, minus a lot of this base material, out in the countryside where they've been there for hundreds of years. And I can imagine actually painting this up with a very weathered stone finish. And there are some really nice spray-on paints that have that kind of sandy texture, which might work really well for this. And again, I could see this being something that on Weir Yard I would put out in the countryside and have it as an old pagan cross something like that, that just kind of has always been there. And that will give some really good opportunities to weather up, maybe with some lichen and verdigris. But certainly this is a good substantial piece, and the material is actually really nice and strong. And it's something that I know early 3D prints could be a little bit brittle, but these have come out really, really nice. We're also not seeing the stratification that I've seen in the past. The actual resolution of the print is getting better and better. I really like the idea of having this up on the top of Jablite Mountain, and I want it weathering down, so it's some kind of old thing that's been there for ever and a day. And the base itself I will blend into the landscape, so I will probably grass over a lot of this once it's in place. But first up, I'm going to be wanting to weather it. And with something like this, it's stone. The Humbrol number 31 is actually quite a good colour for this. It is matte. And I'm just looking through some of my weathering powders. And I'm going to have a little bit of the chrome oxide green, a kind of verdigris that a lot of these stone objects do gather over the years. But I'm just looking through some of the other stuff. I think dark earth, just an ever so slight dusting of dark earth might be a good idea as well. And I just use makeup brushes for these, cheap makeup brushes. I've got loads of these from over the years. For some reason, every time you buy a blusher brush in a set, they come with loads of these and they never wear out, so I've got loads of spare ones. So it's quite easy to do some basic weathering. Just whatever you do, don't get this stuff everywhere, because it does tend to stick to everything. And what I'm going to do, holding this by the base, just give it a little bit of a dusting over. And this is matting it down, giving it a little bit of a texture to the surface. So we're breaking up that mono colour that the Humbrol enamel leaves. And you don't want too much, just bash any excess off the brush. Then just get some of this on there. I think I've got a little bit too much. So I'm just going to work some of this through, work some of this off. And I'm going to do some of the base as well. After I've got this on, I can just tone it a little bit with a bit of a wash too. With a lot of these, less is more. It's about just making them look a bit grimy, a bit kind of lived in. And then I want a little bit, not too much. Again, this is something that I think less is more of. If you go too much with this green, it does look a little bit peculiar. But what I want is just ever so slight green in here. And this is that verdigris that stone can kind of get over time. So mute some of that brown weathering powder as well. And the 3D printing gives quite a good key for, it brings out some of the stratification, works to your advantage on stone like this, because it gives the surface a little bit of a texture that the weathering can then kind of key into and give you the highlights. I'll put a little bit more down on the base where water would just kind of linger. I'm just building up these different colours over the base coat. And then I'm quite happy with that. That's nicely weathered. I'm going to put that to one side now. I'm perfectly happy with how that's turned out. This is the area that I've got planned for the Celtic Cross. And I'm thinking that just in here somewhere is going to be the best place for it. Looks a bit odd and out of place at the moment, but it's going to just get blended in with some grass. So just deciding the location, and I think that's perfect. So what I'm going to do is just use some cheap PVA. This will just bed it down and in, so I'm just going to fill up the area where the base is going to be. have to be too amazingly neat. And just to make sure, I'm going to put just a little bit around the base as well. And that's going to just be our initial sticking that in. And then what I want to do is just build up. I'm going to start to cover some of the lower steps. And I want a slightly more of a pattern around it. I don't want it to be neat. And this grass is just kind of, that's already here on Jablite Mountain, was an early installation, so not too bothered about going over it with some longer grass. It has had a pass with the static grass applicator, but this is hopefully going to turn out just right. And then it's simply a case of adding in that static grass. And there we're complete. We've got the Celtic Cross in, and once the glue's all set, I'll just clean it up with a dry paintbrush and just brush any of the static grass that's got onto the cross, and also these little horses here as well. Really easy to clean up. So I'm really pleased with that. It's just a nice little scenic addition to Jablite Mountain. If you really wanted to, you could use, again, something like a brush or a small screwdriver just to clear some of that static grass from the base, but I've chosen to leave it be. I wanted this Celtic Cross to look like something that had been here a very long time, and as such would be somewhat overgrown. Given that Weir Yard is intended to be in the sort of 50s through to the 70s period, depending on what stock I put on it, I thought that this would kind of predate the interest in clearing up and semi-restoring some of these ancient artifacts. So I'd leave it in this much more run-down kind of condition. These are some birdhouses, and I'll be honest, I know that people do have these in their gardens, but they always make me think of a garden centre where you have a whole load of these all lined up, nice, bright and shiny, that people can buy and stick in their garden. And there's certainly a lot of possibilities for those. Again, really nice and fine, and you can see the amount of see-through detail that you can end up with the 3D print. We've got here Pigstys, again perfect for out in the countryside, and you can either have these as a working pigsty with the little piggy wiggies, the piggly wigglies around, or even just as a kind of a derelict suggestion of what once was. But again, really nice fidelity. I do like the actual galvanized corrugated iron. Really works quite well, and again really quite strong. And I do like the fact that they've sent over some pig troughs as well to go with them. Again, a range of different sizes. You could use them for more than just like pig swill troughs, but I could see these looking really nice with a kind of a metallic finish. So I'm guessing that those are all going to go together, the pigsties and the pig troughs. Another thing that I can see a lot of use for are these cement mixers. Again, something you could model a building site, or even, I think, for Weir Yard, these would be more likely to end up severely rusted and bruised in the scrapyard area, and I think that these will make a great addition to that. And I really do like the idea of painting them up in a very washed out matte kind of yellow, and then have a go using a rust wash and the black wash with an effect that I've used quite effectively on the Hornby HTO hoppers to actually make it look very rusted and distressed. And there's two of these in the pack, and you can see that these ones actually do come on the backing that they're printed on. And I'm really interested actually to see how these turn out. These are now heavily weathered up, And I like the way as well that they're in two different poses. So these are going to go in the kind of junkyard area. And if you want to fix that weathering powder and stop any rubbing off, as you can see it is a little on my fingers, you can use something like hairspray. Is really good just to fix in place. And I will give it a blast over once I'm happy with them in position and any touch-up weathering that I want to add. And that yellow paint that I originally painted them in is now well and truly covered over with dirt and muck. And you can still see it in places, and it does make quite a good base for that weathering. I want to build up the junk. I was never really happy with the leftovers from my scrap box. They weren't really the best pieces. And these 3D printed items do give a great opportunity to add some in. And so I'm going to just put a couple of these pieces in, maybe one there, possibly another one tucked away at the back here, and they'll just be part of the junk pile. And that's really what I want. We've already got some of the stuff that I got sent previously, you can see has already started to creep into this area. And fastening these down is really quite simple. It's just a case of a little bit of, in this case I'm using speed bond, and I'm just going to just put them into position. And again, a little bit of the speed bond, and I'm going to just place that back here. And once that glue dries, they're perfectly in place as part of the kind of discarded junk. I think I may still tone down some of the other items around them just to get a much bigger sense of decrepitude in. But I really like the look of these. There's something really great about these items, and I'm guessing that they wouldn't look out of place anywhere from the 1950s right through to almost the present day, as the design of some of these cement mixers hasn't really changed much at all. But they really do add some welcome variety into the junk pile here. So really, really pleased with these. The next item we've got here is, let's just have a look. This is a plow. Again, some really nice detail in there. It needs to be carefully removed from the backing. But that will be a really good addition to the Cambridge roller. Again, I'm more inclined to use these as a scenic feature, kind of abandoned in the undergrowth, in fields, the corners of fields. And that's really how I probably have seen these more than in use. These, unless you are modelling the kind of a much earlier period when this style of farm machinery was in regular use, then I think this would be perfect for scenic features. So I'm going to start with dark rust. And with this, I actually, I just want to dull down some of this, the paint that's really, really bright, some of that gunmetal. These have been sat rusting, and I guess that the plough blades, if they've not been through the ground, would rust up quite quickly. So, do both sides. Actually, we lose a lot of that silvery colour in the process. Then we can scrub at it, and then we get a hint of it back. And then I want a little bit on the rest of the structure. I'm going to change up the colours now. I'm actually going to go for that light rust. I think it's enough of a different colour that we can just kind of get some highlights of this around some of the actual linkages. Just some little patches. And it's almost a case of stippling this on. Again, a little bit of work with the finger just to clean up some small areas. This area here is where I'm going to be putting the plough, and I think with this I'm going to try a slightly different technique, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a spot, and I'm going to actually, I think here is a nice interesting spot. I'm going to put a load of glue down, and then what I want to do is just loosely push into that some of the extra long static grass, And this will be part of the base. This is so that the grass is underneath the plough, pushing through it. I'm just going to work that out a little bit. That's quite clumped, so I'm just going to try and spread this out and up. Not pushing it down into the glue because that's where the plough itself will come in. I think we're going to need a little bit more just over here, and that does give the opportunity. Let's see if we've got some green. Get a little bit of green down into there. That's probably more than enough. Don't overdo it. Pull these clumps apart, and then the actual plough itself, I'm going to put a little bit of glue just on the base of each of the parts that will be resting on the ground, just to help it stick in place. And what I actually want is to just maneuver that down into the glue, the static grass, and then a pair of tweezers. Let's just try and work the grass in and around. That glue is still a little bit kind of white. It will dry clear. I'm going to find a couple more little bits, nice little tuft of grass. I'm going to do a little bit of green in there, and I want quite a big tuft that I'm going to push down into this end piece. And this is going to be just kind of the long bits of grass. Maneuver them in, maneuvering them in and around. Just try and get some of that off the bottom of these. And a little bit of work here. And really it's just a case of keep moving it until you're happy. And then I'm also going to do a quick blast over with the static grass layering spray. As a final touch, an ever so slight amount of this really light green algae scatter. Again, War World Scenics is great for this. Just putting a tiny amount. Blast through. Again, it's all going to dry clear. Just give it a very quick blast over the area with a small amount of static grass from the actual applicator. And there, that should be done. And we've actually managed to bury the plough just a little bit. So again, with the tweezers, whilst the glue is all just wet, let's just try and clear back a little bit of the plough. And there, a piece of derelict farm implement just buried into the grass. Once that glue dries, that's going to be nice and clear. We've lost all that white tinge, and I've got this as a really overgrown piece of farming equipment. Possibly you might choose to not quite bury it as much, but this just gives an idea of how you can bed them in and make it look like it's been there a huge length of time. I'm going to just open this one up. We've got an air compressor. This bit here is the case which goes over the belt drive. Yeah, so you can have this with the cover not in place, or you can glue it in, and it gives you a much better 3D effect. So again, quite interesting, possibly a little bit more modern than Weir Yard would accommodate, but really nice. Again, it shows up just the level of detail that can be achieved with these 3D prints. And then finally, these are always fun, and I really love the fact that the Billy's replacement speakers, people have taken it and run with it, and we actually have a pair of Billy's replacement speakers. I can imagine these, actually, they call them Mickey Mouse cars, the ones you see in election time, that have these loudspeakers on top and broadcasting partly political broadcasts. So I can see these actually being quite fun. But thanks ever so much for this. And it just shows the kind of bespoke items that you can very easily create with a 3D printer. No weathering whatsoever on the Billy's replacement speakers. It really is just a case of these are a nice fun item, and I know that TimbScale made these specially for me, but I'm guessing if you ask them nicely, you too can get your own Billy's replacement speakers for any building project that you want to do, and I think they'll be a fun wagon load for me, or maybe even put them on the back of a lorry, maybe with a sign saying "Vote Billy" at in the 1983 general election or something like that. So they're a great fun little item. All in all, the TimbScale range gives you a wide variety of bits and pieces, detailing parts which let you really go to town and create something special on your model railway. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that video, and I'd like to extend again a big thanks to TimbScale for sending over these items for review. What did you guys think of these? I always love to hear from you in the comments section down below. Don't forget as well that you can follow the link in the description box if you want to go and browse the full range from TimbScale and see just what they've got for you. But until next time, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also you can check us out over on Patreon too. And until then, happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, and Alan Dickerson. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.